Atari have been enjoying a resurgence in recent years, with the Atari 2600 Plus coming out at the tail end of 2023, and with their latest game, NeoSprint, being released on just about every modern system. This is a good time for the fans of the company. Today we'll be taking a look at NeoSprint, a racer released in June of this year. The game promises exhilarating isometric arcade action, and I've been taking it for a test drive over the last week or so to let you know whether it's worth your time. Thank you to Atari for providing me with a Steam key. Now let's get behind the wheel and see if NeoSprint is more fast and furious than Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Older viewers may well be aware that NeoSprint is actually the latest entry in Atari's Sprint series. Sprint 2 first hit the arcade in 1976 and was not only one of the first racers, but also one of the first video games ever released. Hold on, Dan, did you say Sprint 2? Surely you mean Sprint, right? Yes, it is a little bit confusing, but the reason for the first game in the series being a 2 is that it was a 2-player game. In fact, the sequels were called Sprint 4 and Sprint 8. In the 80s, Super Sprint was released on several home consoles, and the series basically sat untouched until now. After an almost 40-year gap, NeoSprint is the latest entry to the series. Published by Atari and developed by Headless Chicken Games, NeoSprint is available on Steam, Nintendo Switch, Xbox Series S and X, and PlayStation 4 and 5. NeoSprint features a campaign mode that acts as a story of sorts, albeit a very basic one. It is essential to play through the campaign first, as it allows you to unlock new designs for your cars, as well as tracks and elements for the in-game track builder. More on that later. There's also a Grand Prix mode that allows you to choose 4 tracks, as well as customise your race rules and then go on to win a cup. There are also options for free race, obstacle course and time trial to give the game some longevity. Plus, of course, there's multiplayer options which are essential in the Sprint series, allowing up to 8 players to compete with each other. So how does the game actually feel to play? Well, it's a lot of fun. The controls are easy to pick up, and the campaign mode does have you completing a simple tutorial to get you up to speed. One thing that I liked is that you can choose to use the face buttons of your controller. For example, A is used to accelerate on an Xbox controller, or you can use the shoulder buttons if you prefer, so acceleration's done with the right trigger button. It isn't the sort of racer that allows you to simply hold the accelerator down and fly around the course. You will have to make use of your brakes on occasion, particularly when taking on a corner. The AI opponents are brilliant. I know in some racing games they're a lot like robots that make no mistakes whatsoever, but in this game they're just as error prone as a human controlled driver, which I like. As you play through the campaign, the opponent level improves to add more of a challenge, though in the other modes you can choose between easy, medium and hard before taking to the road. The obstacle course mode is probably the most interesting, as it adds some challenge to the levels. You have to avoid objects that are left lying around the course, like cones, fences and oil spills.
And some idiot had left like a ramp thing out.
Litter bugs.
I could see the people were going, oh my god, if that guy hits that ramp going at that speed, he's definitely dead. I hit the ramp, I took off in the air, I turned over in the air, and they were going, well, he's definitely dead now. I landed on my wheels, pulled over and said, what were you worried about?
As mentioned before, there is a track builder, and I found this fairly easy to learn, though it was a little time consuming. But for those who like creating stuff, you'll enjoy this, I think. You can even upload your track to the server so that it can be enjoyed by other players. Now for some negatives. Firstly, I experienced a few instances of the game crashing. Perhaps that's just my laptop's issue, but I wanted to point it out anyway. Secondly, the game can be a bit repetitive, which I suppose is true of any racing game to be fair, though I wish there were some power-ups or perhaps special abilities available for each of the 9 car types featured in the game, just to add some more fun to the races. That said, the obstacle course does make up for this issue somewhat. The final thing, and this isn't one of my negatives by the way, it's just another point that I want to mention about the gameplay, is that there's an option for players regarding the camera. You can either set it to be zoomed in, focusing on your car, or you can have it fill the screen with the entire track, which is a good option if you want to anticipate sudden corners or upcoming hazards. Visually, the game looks awesome. Colourful and cartoony, which is what you'd want from an arcade racer like this. The characters and the cars, they look like they've come off the pages of a kid's comic book. The levels all have different looks, with tracks in the desert, the city and snow, which gives your eyes plenty of variety. And there's neon, and who doesn't love a bit of neon, particularly in the city levels. For those who've played any of the previous editions of the Sprint series, you'll also notice that this game is pretty true to the look of those older games, although this still feels very much like a game released in 2024, it hasn't forgotten its roots. If you're an Atari fan, then there's also lots of references to look out for. They can be seen on the menus, the cars, the buildings and the billboards around the circuits. And this should give you a nice fuzzy nostalgic feeling, and we do love fuzzy nostalgic feelings on this channel. The aspect of the game that I love most is the sound. I'm your stereotypical retro gamer. I love lo-fi synthwave tunes, and this game's soundtrack has a great 80s inspired vibe to it. I'm not ashamed to say this, but I would happily sit and listen to the official soundtrack if they eventually make it available on Spotify. It's not on there right now, I've already checked. The sound effects are as you'd expect. You've got revs, screeching brakes, and all the rest. And there isn't much more to add about the game's sound, other than to say I think it's top quality. So does NeoSprint deserve a spot in your gaming garage? This game is available on just about every modern console, Xbox, PlayStation and Switch, plus Windows. I'll pop some links in the video description. It's priced at $19.99. That's in British pounds, by the way, or $22.49 on Nintendo. Yes, you've got to love that Switch tax. And I think for that price, if you like what you've seen from the on-screen footage, then it probably is worth it. But if you're not entirely convinced, then perhaps you could wait for a sale, as I'm sure it'll be on one before too long. Rating wise, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. Now I love the soundtrack, the visuals are appealing, and there are a few different game modes. However, I think they've missed a trick by not including power-ups, and I think they could have made the campaign a little bit more interesting. As mentioned, it's fairly basic. I think if you like track building, you'll definitely get some mileage out of that, though it isn't something that revs my engine. As an arcade racer, this game is a lot of fun. Let me know in the comments if you plan to pick up a copy. And if you've enjoyed this, then you might like one of these two videos, my retro review of F1 on the Sega Mega Drive, or my video about handheld gaming consoles of the 90s. Thanks for watching, until next time, stay safe and keep gaming.